Hello my friend, I hope that you are well. Now that you are familiar with the fundamentals of the JavaScript language, we need to talk about JavaScript or release or version before moving on. And we briefly talked about this in the intro video, but now let's go into more depth because it is really important to know about how JavaScript release work and how we can use them. It's important for your work as a web developer and also because you will see these topics coming up in the developer community all the time. And so you want to be able to understand what's going on. And the best way to start understanding JavaScript versions is by looking at the history of JavaScript. So let's do that. And let's start at the beginning of the internet itself. So quickly after the internet was invented, and two first web browsers were developed. Developers want to start making websites more interactive. In other words, they need a programming language for the browser. Okay, oops. So, in 1995, the Netscape Navigator, which by the time was the dominant browser, hired a guy named Brandon H., if I pronounce it really well, to create the very first version of JavaScript in just 10 days. It was called Mocha. So not just JavaScript yet, but it already had many of the fundamental features that modern JavaScript has today. So that's very impressive that he basically created this first version in really just 10 days. Then in 1996, Mocha was renamed Tool LiveScript, which was again renamed to JavaScript for one simple reason: to attract developers from the hottest language at the time, which was Java. I am Java developer. So the Java in JavaScript was really just for marketing reasons, because the language itself has basically nothing to do with Java. No. Some beginners think that is the case, but actually no. JavaScript and Java are two completely different languages, okay? It's very important. And in 1996, Microsoft launched the Internet Explorer, which basically copied JavaScript from Netscape, but they called the JavaScript for a legal reason, because, well, you actually cannot just go around and copy other people's programming language. Now, what this means is that we now have two very similar but competing languages, which of course is never a good idea into the long run. And so, with the internet growing like crazy around this time, people realized they needed to standardize JavaScript. So the language was submitted to an independent standard organization called ECMA, which in 1997 released ECMAScript 1 or ES1. This was the very first official standard for the JavaScript language. And with this, every browser could now implement the same standard JavaScript. In the real world, we usually use the term ECMAScript to refer to the standard, while JavaScript is used when we talk about the language in practice. And it's implemented in browsers. Now, fast forward to 2009, after a lot of complication and disagreement about where the language should be headed, ES6 was released with a lot of great new features. And then, finally, another 6 years later, the much awaited new version ES6 was launched in June 2015. And this was the single biggest update to the language ever. So it contained a ton of new exciting features, which we will explore through this entire course, inshallah. This was and still is really big deal for JavaScript and for the whole web developers community. Now, you will also see ES6 being called ES 2015, which has actually the official name, but most people as me just call it ES6. And so that's what I am gonna do here as well. And actually the reason for ES6 being called ES 2015 officially is that in 2015 ECMAScript changed to annual release cycle. So right now there's gonna be a new release every single year. The reason for that is that they prefer to just add a small number of new features per year instead of shipping a huge new version every couple of years like it happened with the ES6. And so this way it's gonna be much easier for everyone to keep up to date. And so according to this new annual release cycle, in 2016 we have ES 2016 or ES7 was released, and also ES 2017, etc., etc. And like this, it will continue until the end of time or something like that. Now, there is one particularity about JavaScript release, which is pretty unique for any programming language, and that's backward compatibility all the way to ES1. So what does that actually mean? Well, basically it means that if you were to take some JavaScript code written back in 1997 and put it in a modern browser with a modern JavaScript engine today, it would still work just the same. So again, the JavaScript engine that's in our browser today is able to understand old code written 25 years ago without having to rely on version numbers or anything like that. It just works. And it works this way because of the fundamental principle that's baked into the JavaScript language. And its development, which is to not break the web. This means that there is almost never anything removed from the language, but only added in a new version. And actually, we cannot really call them a new version, not even, because they do not contain breaking change, like when other language moved to a new version. Instead, new versions are always just incremental update, which added new stuff. And so I like to call them release and not versions. So ECMAScript committee, who works on updating the language, does all this so that all the websites basically keep working forever. Just imagine they removed some important features that made the website from 2008 work just fine. If you then wanted to visit that page, it will be broken. And that's why we fortunately have to don't break the web principle. No, of course it comes with problem because there are tons of old bugs and weird things in the language. Remember that Brendan Eich made the very first version in just 10 days, and no one back then could even imagine what JavaScript will be used for one day. The initial goal of JavaScript was just to add some simple dynamics to page, not to write whole web application in a browser like we do today. But anyway, these bugs and weird quirks in the language have been giving the language a bad reputation among many programmers who can really take JavaScript serious because of this. But here is the thing. We can actually go around many of this weird stuff by simply learning the modern JavaScript that matters today and just ignore most of the old weird stuff. And so that's exactly what we are gonna do in this course, inshallah. So next time your friends start hating on JavaScript, and believe me, this actually happens, then just tell them about the amazing things that you can build with it. But now, there is one more thing that we need to talk about here, and that is forward compatibility. So, what do you think would happen if we took this totally made up code from the year 2121 and tried to run it in today's browsers? Well, you are probably right. It would not work at all. So there will be errors left and right and nothing will work. That's why we say that JavaScript is not forward compatible. Basically because current browsers do not support code from the future. No one knows what is the future. And this actually brings us to our next topics, which is how can we use modern JavaScript today. Because browsers that users are using may be old and there is no forward compatibility, right? So to answer the question, how we can use modern JavaScript today, we need to consider two distinct scenarios: development and productions. So the development phase is simply when you are building the site or application on your computer to ensure you can use the latest JavaScript feature in this phase. All you have to do is to use the most up-to-date version of the Google Chrome browser or any other browser. This will then ensure that all the features I show you in this course will work for you as well, but I recommend you Google Chrome browser. The second scenario is production, which is when your web application is finished. So you deploy it on the internet and it's then running in your user's browser. And this is where problems may appear, because this is the part that we actually cannot control. We cannot control which browser the users use, and we also cannot assume that all our users always use the latest version of the browsers, right? Now, the solution to this problem is to basically convert this modern JavaScript version back to ES5 using a process called transpiling and also polyfiling. We will use a tool called Babel later in the course to transpile our code, but for now, during the course, we won't need that. Again, because you are using the most up-to-date browser during development. Transpiling back to ES5 is only necessary after your application is developed and you want to ship it to your users. Alright, so now let's take a look at how different JavaScript releases can be used today. So first off, ES5 is of course fully supported in all browsers today, all the way down to Internet Explorer 9 from 2011. So we can assume that ES5 is safe to be used at this point, which is the reason why we use it as the target for transpiling. Now about the newer release, ES6, ES7 and all the way to ES 2020, they're actually quite well supported already in all modern browsers. And you actually call all the current version together ES6 Plus. So right now, that's from ES6 to ES 2020, and basically all together they are the modern JavaScript, okay? Now, it is in this modern JavaScript, so in this ES6 Plus, where transpiling comes in, as I mentioned earlier, again, because it's not safe to assume that all our users are using this modern browsers and we don't want to break our app for them, right? And by the way, if you want to stay up to date with what features are currently supported in which browser, you can check out the ES6 compatibility table. It's really interesting. The link, I will put it in on the description of this video, inshallah. Next, there are also the future release of the language like ES 2021, ES 2022 and so on, and this feature release together are many times called ES Next. Now, why is this even relevant? Well, because most browsers actually start implementing new features even before they enter the official ECMAScript specification. That's possible because as new features are proposed, they have to go through 4 stages, starting with stage 1, where they are first admitted all the way to stage 4, at which point they enter to the language officially. But when the feature is a stage 3, browsers can be pretty sure it will eventually pass to stage 4. And so they're gonna start implementing that feature while still in stage 3. And there is a lot more to be said about this. And actually, I found this really fascinating, but I am gonna stop here. You can find tons of information about this online if you want to learn more. And a great place to start is actually once more this compatibility table that's up here on this slide. But anyway, as this new features start coming out, I will simply add a new video about them to the course in order to keep it updated with annual release cycle. It is now way easier to do because there will be no drastic change to the language like ES6 was. Okay? And now to finish, let's quickly talk about how versions or release are taught in this course. Now, so as I said earlier, I will teach you a modern JavaScript right from the beginning of the course. Now I used to teach this course starting with ES5 and then moving to ES6 in the middle of the course, but now after a couple of years, it was time to fully move to modern JavaScript. However, it's also super important to learn how some things used to be done before we had this fancy modern JavaScript. For example, in this section, I already showed you the modern const and let for variable declaration, but also how we used to use U before. And there will be many more examples like this, but why better with ES5 at all, you may ask. Well, here is why. First, you will better understand how some features in JavaScript actually work behind the scenes. For example, ES6 class, which had all the implementation details of subject-oriented programming in JavaScript. Also, many tutorials and example code that you will find online are still written in ES5 today. Plus, as a developer, in many jobs, you will actually have to work on older code base. And it is totally possible that the code base may still contain a lot of ES5 code. Okay? So I hope that made sense. And that's it for this video and for this section. So see you inshallah in the next one about the second part of the fundamental in JavaScript. Just see again, if you don't understand any topic what I have talked about this or this feature in this section, rewatch the design video and practice, and you will be familiar with all this concept before to jump to the next one. It's very important to understand this section. It's very, very important because the next one will be more advanced. Okay, each time we advance, each time we jump to the advanced feature. Okay, so see you next video, next section inshallah. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to click to the bells button to receive all new videos, and to subscribe to my channel, also to follow me on Instagram, teams.winners, faisal.chico, Telegram, Twitters. Tell you goodbye. Wassalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.